Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to get seriously deep. Today, we're diving into the Mariana Trench.
We'll be using excerpts from the Wikipedia article to uncover some seriously incredible facts about it.
We're not just talking about the what, though. We're after the wow. For example, did you know that if you put Mount Everest at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, its peak would still be underwater, like more than a mile underwater?
It really puts the scale of this place into perspective.
Absolutely mind-boggling.
To understand how it formed, we need to look at tectonic plates. These are massive, moving pieces that make up the Earth's outer layer.
So like a giant jigsaw puzzle, constantly shifting and grinding against each other.
Exactly. And the Mariana Trench formed where the Pacific Plate, one of the oldest and densest plates, is slowly sliding under the smaller Mariana Plate.
Okay, so one plate is being forced under the other.
Yes, it's called subduction. And that downward force is what creates the trench. Imagine pushing one edge of a rug under the other. See how it creates a dip.
Oh, that's a great way to picture it. And the same process is also what creates those volcanic islands in the Marianas, right?
Exactly. As the Pacific Plate goes deeper, it's met with intense heat and pressure. That causes water trapped within the rocks to be released. That, in turn, creates molten rock, or magma, which rises and eventually erupts, forming volcanic islands.
Wow, a whole fiery underwater ballet of geology happening down there. Now, about exploring this incredible place, the Wikipedia article mentions attempts to measure the trench's depth going all the way back to the 1870s. They used a weighted rope back then.
Hard to imagine today, right?
Yeah.
Lowering a rope mile after mile into the darkness.
And then waiting to see if it even reaches the bottom. Talk about nerve-wracking.
Thankfully, technology has come a long way. Sonar, which uses sound waves to map the ocean floor, was revolutionary. It gave us a much clearer picture of the trench.
But even sonar feels almost old-fashioned compared to what came next. I'm talking about the bathyscaphe Trieste in 1960.
Ah, yes.
The first manned vehicle to reach the very bottom of the Mariana Trench.
The Trieste's mission to the Challenger Deep, the trench's absolute deepest point, was a huge deal in deep-sea exploration. Jacques Parc and Don Walsh, the two explorers on board, endured immense pressure on that descent. And it wasn't just about getting to the bottom either. Their observations changed our understanding of life on Earth.
Because they found out that even in those extreme conditions, life finds a way.
Exactly. Now, there's some debate about a few of their observations, like whether they really saw flatfish and shrimp at that depth. But the fact they found any signs of life at all was groundbreaking. They said the bottom was covered in this layer of diatomaceous ooze.
Diatomaceous ooze. Even the name sounds alien. What is that exactly?
It may sound strange, but it's essentially sediment made up of the skeletal remains of tiny algae called diatoms. To think that even at that depth, with no sunlight, life not only exists but thrives, it's pretty remarkable.
The Trieste's journey really showed us that life in the Mariana Trench is possible. What other kinds of creatures have we found down there?
Oh, some really amazing ones. You're talking about creatures that live with crushing pressure, no sunlight, and limited food.
Like something out of science fiction.
Totally.
The Wikipedia article mentions something called deep-sea gigantism. What is that exactly?
It means that some species actually grow way bigger in the deep ocean than their relatives closer to the surface.
So like bigger is better down there.
Well, it's probably more complicated than that. It's likely a mix of factors. Extreme pressure, for one, might actually affect their cells. Plus, there's limited food and really cool temperatures. That can lead to slower metabolisms, which can also mean bigger body sizes.
So they're perfectly adapted to their environment. Fascinating. The article uses these supergent amphipods as an example. They sound huge. Like they look like oversized pill bugs, some over 10 inches long. What do those things even eat down there?
Mostly organic matter that drifts down from the surface. Dead plankton, even whale carcasses.
Talk about a feast. But amphipods aren't the only strange things down there. The article also mentions a unique snailfish.
Yes, the ethereal snailfish. Discovered back in 2014, it was found living at a record depth for a fish over 8,000 meters.
8,000 meters, that's what, almost 5 miles underwater? Wow. It's incredible that anything can live under that much pressure.
It is remarkable. And then, in 2017, they found another new species of snailfish even deeper in the trench.
Like, we need more proof that the Mariana Trench is full of surprises. These discoveries are really exciting, but it makes you wonder about human activity down there.
You're right. As remote as it is, it's still part of our planet, and we're seeing evidence of human impact there.
That's what I was afraid of. Plastic pollution, I'm guessing.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
In 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo found a plastic bag and candy wrappers at the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
Well, we can't even escape plastic 7 miles below the surface. It's depressing.
It really is. And it's not just the plastic itself. Remember those amphipods we were talking about?
Hmm.
Research actually shows they're eating microplastics. You know, those tiny particles that are everywhere now.
It's really scary how far it spreads.
It highlights how connected everything on Earth is. Our actions here on land impact even the most remote places.
This Wikipedia article also mentions PCBs being found in the Mariana Trench. Weren't those banned a long time ago?
We were, in the 1970s, I think. But their legacy lives on, unfortunately. Back in 2016, researchers found really high levels of PCBs in crustaceans from the trench.
PCBs? Those were used in, what was it, coolants and stuff?
Yeah, coolants, electrical equipment, things like that. And they were banned because of how harmful they are to wildlife and people.
So even though we stopped using them, they still managed to reach one of the deepest parts of the ocean.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder of the lasting impact pollution can have.
It really is.
And there's more.
Oh no. What else?
The article also talks about carbon-14, a radioactive isotope being found in marine life in the trench.
Carbon-14. Wait, as in from nuclear bombs?
Yes. It's a sobering thought. Human actions have far-reaching consequences.
It's just wild to me.
Exactly.
That's something that happened so long ago, so far away, can still be affecting the Mariana Trench today.
Yeah. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Definitely. About the legacy we're leaving, you know.
Absolutely. It's something we have to face. We've seen how resilient life in the Mariana Trench is, but even the most extreme environments aren't untouchable. What we do affects everything.
It makes you wonder, what else is down there? What do we need to learn about the Mariana Trench?
Well, that's the thing about science. There's always more to find out. I mean, look at how those creatures have adapted to that kind of pressure and the darkness. Figuring out how they do that could lead to some big breakthroughs.
I can imagine. For medicine even. Or like engineering, maybe.
Exactly. And we need to understand how much humans are impacting the trench and how to fix it.
For sure.
We've really just scratched the surface.
This deep dive has been incredible.
How'd you enjoy it?
It's just amazing down there. But it also makes you realize we have to be careful. Everything on Earth is connected.
That's a good way to put it. It's about balance and taking care of what we have. As we explore more, we have to be responsible. Make sure the Mariana Trench and the whole planet stays healthy.
I couldn't agree more. And on that note, a huge thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the Mariana Trench. We've only scratched the surface, but hopefully you're ready to learn more. Check out the show notes for more info, and until next time, keep exploring. Ever wish there was a universal translate button for real life, so everyone could just understand each other? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into that very idea, exploring the world of Esperanto.
A language literally invented to be a universal second language.
Exactly, Esperanto.
It's a fascinating concept. And you might be surprised to know that Esperanto actually boasts more speakers than any other constructed language out there.
Really?
Even, get this, some native speakers.
Native speakers. So we're not just talking about like hobbyists dabbling in a linguistic experiment. There's a whole generation growing up with this language.
You got it. And where you find those Esperanto speakers, you find something called Esperantujo.
Esperantujo.
Now hold on. It's not a physical country you can find on a map, but rather the culture, the community that seems to blossom wherever this language is spoken.
Okay, now my brain's doing double take. A culture without borders. I'm already hooked. But let's rewind for a sec. Who dreamed this whole Esperanto thing up in the first place?
That would be L.L. Zamenhof, back in the late 19th century. Picture this. He grows up in a town he himself describes as divided Russians, Poles, Germans, Jews, all kind of eyeing each other with suspicion.
And Zamenhof's caught right in the middle of all that, right?
Yeah.
Learning that everyone's supposed to be a brother, but the reality on the street tells a very different story.
Exactly. He even wrote about feeling this tension very acutely.
He did.
Oh, yeah. He said, and I quote, "In such a town, a sensitive nature feels more acutely than elsewhere the misery caused by language division. I was brought up as an idealist. I was taught that all people were brothers, while outside in the street at every step, I felt that there were no people, only Russians, Poles, Germans, Jews, and so on."
Wow, that's That's heavy stuff, especially for a young mind. You can practically hear the disillusionment in his words. It's no wonder he dedicated himself to finding a solution, believing that this shared language, this common ground, could be the key to overcoming those divisions.
And he wasn't all talk. Zamenhof dove headfirst into language studies, ultimately drawing inspiration from a variety of Indo-European languages, especially Romance languages, for his creation.
Yeah, it's always been fascinating to me that about 80% of Esperanto's vocabulary is rooted in Romance languages. Was that like a deliberate choice to make it easier for certain groups to learn, or was it more about the languages that influenced Zamenhof personally?
It's probably a bit of both, to be honest. While Zamenhof definitely aimed for simplicity and accessibility, his own linguistic background clearly played a role. But here's the thing. He didn't just borrow words, he crafted a whole system. His grammar, for example, was intentionally designed to be logical, regular.
Unlike, say, English, where the rules seem to change every other Tuesday.
Exactly. A stark contrast to the complexities, the irregularities you find in many natural languages.
So Esperanto has, like, its own elegant structure, kind of like how coding languages have their own syntax.
You could say that.
So what year did this language officially become Esperanto?
Well, the first Esperanto grammar book was published in 1887.
1887.
Think about it. No internet, no social media to spread the word. Yet this idea, it took root. It spread through letters, periodicals, and passionate individuals.
Just the sheer willpower of people connecting with this idea.
There's something incredibly inspiring about that kind of grassroots growth, don't you think?
Absolutely. It speaks volumes about that yearning for connection, something that transcends borders and languages. So 1887 Esperanto is out in the wild. What happens next? How does a brand new language gain traction in a world without the internet?
It was slow and steady, that's for sure, but driven by this shared passion for Zamenhof's vision. Picture people from all walks of life, scattered across continents, connecting through handwritten letters, shared publications, all united by this common linguistic thread.
Wow.
It was truly a testament to the power of language to bring people together, even at a time when physical distance seemed almost insurmountable.
That's just remarkable. It paints such a vivid picture of those early Esperantists, their dedication to keeping this dream alive. But I have to ask, with a goal as ambitious as, a universal language, were there ever moments when the future of Esperanto felt uncertain? Did it face any significant challenges in those early years?
Oh, absolutely. And those challenges weren't just logistical hurdles. They were often intertwined with some of the most turbulent events of the 20th century.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Take, for example, the case of Neutral Moresnet.
Neutral Moresnet. Now, that's a name I haven't heard before. Tell me more.
It was this tiny territory caught between what's now Belgium and Germany, with a really diverse population, and a significant number of Esperanto speakers.
Get out!
Oh, yeah. And there were even whispers of making Esperanto its official language.
Yeah.
Imagine that. A place where everyone, regardless of their background, could communicate on equal footing.
It would have been a real-life Esperanto show. A beacon of hope and understanding in a world often, let's face it, riven by division. So what happened? Why did this plan fizzle out?
Well, its timing, frankly, couldn't have been worse. World War I erupted,
Ah, of course.
shattering that fragile peace and throwing Moresnet's future into turmoil.
So amidst the chaos of global conflict, this small territory, this little pocket of linguistic unity, just became another casualty of war.
It's a sad reality, eventually absorbed into Belgium.
A dream cut short by global conflict. It's a stark reminder of how easily idealism can be crushed under the weight of real-world events. But even in the face of such setbacks, Esperanto persevered. Tell me, how did this fledgling language weather the storm of the First World War?
Well, it speaks to the dedication of its speakers, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I mean, Esperanto not only survived, but saw, glimmers of hope in the aftermath of the war.
Glimmers of hope. You make it sound like there was a chance things could have gone differently for Esperanto.
Oh, there were definitely moments when its future seemed bright. For a while there, it even looked like Esperanto might play a role on the world stage.
The world stage. Okay, now you have to elaborate. How does a language invented by one man, even one as passionate as Zamenhof, go from a passion project to the global stage?
Well, in this case, it involved a little organization called the League of Nations.
Wait, Esperanto and international diplomacy? That almost sounds too good to be true. Were they actually considering making it the official language for peace talks or something?
Not peace talks exactly, but close. In 1920, a proposal within the League of Nations actually suggested adopting Esperanto as the official language for international relations. They even had this report from a Japanese delegate outlining its potential benefits for global communication.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. What were the arguments for actually using Esperanto in such a high-stakes arena? And, more importantly, who or what threw a wrench in the flame?
Well, proponents of the idea argued that Esperanto's neutrality, coupled with the relative ease of learning it, would make diplomacy more, shall we say, efficient, more inclusive too. Breaking down those linguistic barriers between nations.
Okay, I can see the logic there. So what happened?
Well, ironically, the very notion of breaking down barriers sparked fear in one very crucial delegate, the representative from France.
Ah, France. Land of love, baguettes, and a certain je ne sais quoi about protecting their language. What were their concerns?
In a nutshell, they worried that adopting Esperanto would, how shall I put this, undermine the French language's international standing, especially in the realm of diplomacy, where it had, held a prominent role for centuries.
So despite what I imagine was a pretty compelling case for Esperanto, the French delegate basically said, "Non, merci," and that was that.
Pretty much. Even though there was a majority vote in favor of Esperanto, the French delegate's single veto was enough to derail the entire proposal.
Talk about one non-carrying a lot of weight. You'd think the potential benefits of more streamlined communication, greater inclusivity, would outweigh the concerns of one language, even a historically significant one, losing a bit of its global spotlight. But it seems like this was just the tip of the iceberg for Esperanto's struggles, am I right?
Sadly, yes. The decades that followed were, well, they were a dark time for Esperanto. It faced a wave of persecution, targeted by regimes like Nazi Germany, Francoist Spain, and Stalin's Soviet Union.
It's just heartbreaking that a language built on such beautiful ideals, peace, understanding, unity became a target for such oppressive regimes. It seems so counterintuitive. What was their justification for persecuting Esperantists?
Well, in the case of Nazi Germany, it was largely fueled by anti-Semitism.
Because Zamenhof was Jewish?
Exactly. They twisted his heritage into a weapon against the entire Esperanto community, essentially branding it a tool for a Jewish conspiracy to, and I'm quoting here, dominate the world. Hitler even went on this whole tirade against Esperanto and Mein Kampf.
Wow. It's chilling how even a language, something meant to connect people, can become so entangled in hateful ideologies. It really makes you question human nature sometimes. How can a community possibly recover from that kind of targeted attack, from being so demonized?
It speaks volumes about the resilience of the human spirit, I think, and, of course, the enduring belief in Zamenhof's original vision. Esperanto not only survived, it eventually began to thrive again.
It's like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Only this time, it's fueled by the hard lessons learned from a world ravaged by division and hatred. This period feels pivotal in the Esperanto story, wouldn't you say? A shift from persecution to, dare I say, a resurgence. What sparked this renewed interest in the language?
Well, there were several factors at play. Firstly, the horrors of the Holocaust had a profound impact on global consciousness. It sparked a conversation, a real yearning for tolerance, for understanding, and that created fertile ground for Esperanto's message of unity to resonate more deeply. Secondly, you have to remember that UNESCO, that's the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, formally recognized Esperanto in 1954.
So even though it never became an official UN language, it at least got a nod of approval for its potential in promoting cross-cultural dialogue. That's fascinating. Tell me more about this UNESCO recognition. What were their specific reasons for throwing their support behind Esperanto?
Essentially, UNESCO saw Esperanto as a valuable tool for fostering international understanding, particularly in education and cultural exchange programs. They recognized that a neutral, easily learned language could help facilitate communication, collaboration between people from all different linguistic backgrounds.
So like building bridges.
Exactly.
It sounds like the seeds of Zamenhof's vision were finally starting to take root on a larger scale. But this is where my inner skeptic chimes in. I mean, how much of an impact can a language, even a well-designed one, really have when it comes to tackling something as complex as, global understanding? Learning a new vocabulary doesn't suddenly erase centuries of cultural clashes and political tensions.
You're absolutely right. Language alone can't solve deeply ingrained issues, but it can be this powerful tool for building bridges, for fostering empathy.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about it. When you make the effort to speak someone else's language, even imperfectly, it demonstrates a willingness to connect, to meet them halfway, to step outside of your own cultural bubble.
Instead of expecting them to always speak yours.
Precisely. It's like extending an olive branch, but instead of a twig, it's a phrase book.
I like that. But let's be honest. Learning a whole new language, takes time, effort, things most people aren't willing to invest in unless there's a tangible benefit. So how did Esperanto bridge that gap? How did it go from a niche interest to something with a bit more, shall we say, widespread appeal?
Well, it found some unexpected allies in some pretty surprising places. For instance, during the Cold War, the U.S. Army saw value in Esperanto's neutrality and ease of learning.
Hold on. You're telling me that GI Joes were out there lobbing Esperanto phrases instead of grenades. That's not exactly the image that comes to mind when I think international language of peace.
Not quite. It wasn't exactly frontline diplomacy, no.
Yeah.
But the U.S. Army did publish military phrase books in Esperanto for training exercises, using it to simulate communication with enemy forces. Even they recognized its practicality for bridging linguistic divides, at least in a simulated setting.
So even amidst Cold War tensions, Esperanto found a role, maybe not in promoting peace directly, but at least in making communication more, well, efficient. It sounds like the language was starting to break free from its niche, popping up in the most unexpected corners of the world. Were there any other surprising adopters of Esperanto during this period?
How about this? Even the Vatican radio broadcasted in Esperanto, reaching a global audience with news and programs.
The Vatican, as in the Pope. That's certainly a plot twist I didn't see coming. What would lead the Catholic Church to embrace a constructed language like Esperanto?
Again, I think it goes back to that idea of reaching as many people as possible with their message. Esperanto's global reach and its neutrality made it an appealing tool for spreading their message of faith and hope.
Okay, that makes sense. Were there any other unlikely Esperanto enthusiasts we should know about?
Well, there was this organization called the World Service Authority. It's a nonprofit dedicated to promoting global citizenship. They even issued something called a World Passport.
A world passport, as in, beam me up, Scotty, I'm a citizen of the universe kind of passport.
You could say that. It's more of a statement about global citizenship than a legally recognized document, to be honest.
So, more symbolic than anything else.
Exactly. However, it highlights Esperanto's unique position as a language meant to transcend national borders. It was written in Esperanto alongside the 6 official UN languages.
So English, French, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, and Chinese.
You got it. Which really says something about its aspirational role in fostering global connection.
It's like Esperanto is trying to elbow its way into that exclusive club of globally recognized languages. Speaking of unlikely places, did you know that even China incorporates Esperanto into some of its state-run media? China, that's a new one. Given their history and their current political climate, it's not exactly the first place that springs to mind when I think of Esperanto. What's the story there?
Well, it seems that even China recognizes the value of, let's say, reaching out to the global Esperanto community. They've dedicated Esperanto services on China Radio International. They even publish an Esperanto version of their online magazine, El Coppola Año.
Wow, Esperanto really does have this knack for popping up in the most unexpected places, defying easy categorization. So here we have this language, once persecuted, dismissed as too idealistic, now being embraced by everyone from the U.S. Army to the Vatican to China. It makes you wonder, has Esperanto finally found its footing in the world? Has it finally stepped out of the shadows and into the mainstream?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? This whole idea of Esperanto going mainstream. On the one hand, you have this surge in online learning, mentions in pop culture, even those surprising endorsements from institutions like the Vatican and the U.S. Army. But on the other hand, it's still far from being a language you hear every day, you know?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a bit of a paradox, really. Esperanto is both thriving and niche at the same time. It's like it's constantly teetering on the edge of broader acceptance, yet hasn't quite taken that final leap.
So what's holding it back? Is it simply a matter of not enough speakers? Or are there deeper challenges to a constructed language like Esperanto ever truly taking root on a global scale? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And like most things worth discussing, there's no easy answer. One argument you often hear is that for a language to truly flourish, it needs more than just speakers. It needs a cultural ecosystem.
Okay, I'm following. You're talking about a shared history. Traditions, values,
Yeah.
maybe even a sense of humor unique to that language. Things that go beyond just the words themselves.
Exactly. Think about the languages you know well. They're deeply intertwined with literature, music, art, even cuisine. These elements create a sense of shared identity, a reason for the language to exist beyond just practical communication.
So in a way, Esperanto is still playing catch-up. It's got the language part down, the grammar, the vocabulary, even a growing online community. But building that rich tapestry of culture, that takes time. Generations, even.
Precisely. And it's not just about time. It's about finding ways to weave Esperanto into the fabric of everyday life, creating art, music, literature that speaks to the human experience in a way that resonates with people from all walks of life.
And maybe, just maybe, that's where those native Esperanto speakers come in. They're the ones growing up immersed in this language, absorbing its nuances, shaping its future in ways we can only imagine.
It's an exciting prospect, isn't it? To think that a language born from this dream of unity could one day become the native tongue of a generation raised on those very ideals.
It's like something out of a science fiction novel, except this is real life happening right now. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the elephant in the room. This whole debate about whether a constructed language, even one as well-designed as Esperanto, can ever truly bridge those deep-seated cultural divides.
Ah, the age-old question. Can a shared language really lead to shared understanding? It's a question that has been debated by linguists, philosophers, and, let's face it, armchair enthusiasts for as long as Esperanto has existed.
And I'm guessing there's no easy answer, right?
You're catching on. There are strong arguments on both sides. On one hand, proponents of Esperanto argue that its neutrality makes it this ideal tool for fostering communication and understanding between people from all different backgrounds. They believe that by using a language that doesn't privilege any one group or culture, you can level the playing field, create a more equitable space for dialogue.
So instead of one culture's language dominating the conversation, everyone meets in the middle on equal linguistic footing.
Exactly. It's like building a bridge across a cultural divide, a bridge that allows people to meet halfway without the baggage of pre-existing linguistic hierarchies. And there's a certain elegance to that idea, a kind of utopian appeal.
I can see that, but what about the other side of the coin? What are the criticisms of this idea of a universal language?
Well, critics often argue that language and culture are so intertwined that even a constructed language, no matter how well-intentioned, will inevitably reflect the biases and perspectives of its creators.
So even though Esperanto was designed to be neutral, it still carries traces of its European roots, which could potentially create an imbalance in cross-cultural communication.
That's one of the arguments, yes. And some critics go even further, arguing that the very idea of a universal language is, in itself, problematic. They believe that linguistic diversity is inherently valuable, and that attempting to homogenize language could lead to a loss of unique cultural identities.
It's like that saying, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his own language, that goes to his heart. It suggests there's this depth of connection that comes from speaking someone's native language, a sense of shared history and identity that a constructed language might struggle to replicate.
That's a beautiful quote, and it really highlights the complexity of this issue. There's no denying the emotional resonance of one's mother tongue, but perhaps that's where Esperanto offers a different kind of value. Not as a replacement for those deep-rooted linguistic identities, but as a bridge, a common ground where people can meet and connect without the pressure of completely assimilating into another culture.
It's like saying, hey, I see you, I respect your language, your culture, but let's also find a way to communicate on equal footing. It's about adding a layer of understanding, not erasing existing ones.
Exactly. And perhaps that's the most important lesson we can learn from Esperanto, that the pursuit of understanding and connection doesn't have to mean sacrificing our unique identities. Instead, it's about finding ways to bridge those differences, to build empathy and understanding across cultures.
So where does that leave us? What's the future of Esperanto? Is it destined to remain a linguistic experiment, a niche interest for idealists? Or does it have the potential to one day fulfill Zamenhof's dream of becoming a truly universal language?
That, my friend, is a question only time can answer. But one thing is certain. Esperanto is a testament to the enduring human desire for connection, for a world where language is a bridge, not a barrier. Whether it achieves its lofty goal of becoming a truly universal language is almost beside the point. What matters is the spirit it embodies, the hope for a more unified and understanding world.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the journey is just as important as the destination. And in the case of Esperanto, that journey is filled with fascinating twists, unexpected turns, and a healthy dose of idealism. It's a story that continues to unfold one word at a time.
Beautifully said. And who knows, perhaps someday we'll all be speaking a little Esperanto.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of Esperanto. We've explored its history, its linguistic quirks, its enduring vision for a more connected world. We hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have.
Yisravito.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep the conversation going.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're looking to get up to speed on all things tiger.
Okay.
And you've brought us a stack of research, including parts of the tiger Wikipedia page.
All right.
So are these majestic creatures doomed? Or can we ensure they have a future? Let's find out.
It's a question a lot of people are asking. Tigers are such powerful symbols, but their numbers have dwindled drastically. To really understand their situation, it's helpful to start with what makes a tiger a tiger.
All right, back to basics. We're all familiar with their iconic look,
Yeah.
but where do they fit in the grand scheme of things?
Well, they belong to the genus Panthera, which they share with lions,
Okay.
leopards, and jaguars. But their closest relative is actually the snow leopard.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Recent genomic analysis has confirmed that there are 6 distinct lineages of living tigers: Bengal,
Okay.
Malayan, Indochinese, South China, Siberian, and Sumatran.
6 distinct lineages. That's a lot of variety. I guess that explains why they're found in so many different environments.
Exactly. From the snowy forests of Siberia to the mangrove swamps of the Sundarbans, tigers have adapted to a range of habitats. And those iconic stripes, they're not just for show.
I was just about to ask about those stripes. They're so striking, but I imagine they serve a practical purpose too, right?
Absolutely. A study using something called Fourier analysis showed that the striping patterns actually match the visual environment of a tiger's habitat, so they're perfectly camouflaged for hunting.
Wow, so it's like nature's own camouflage pattern designed to help them blend into their surroundings. But what about their prey like deer? Don't they see that bright orange fur?
Interestingly enough, deer are likely colorblind, so that orange probably appears more like green to them,
Oh,
allowing tigers to blend in with the foliage. It's a really clever evolutionary adaptation.
so those stripes and that color are working double time to make them stealthy hunters.
Yeah.
But the Wikipedia page mentions some rarer color variations too, right? Like white tigers.
Yes, and there are also golden tigers and pseudomelanistic tigers with very dark, almost merged stripes. But these are incredibly rare in the wild.
Wow.
Sadly, overbreeding in captivity has led to health issues in some of these variations.
It's a reminder that while we might be fascinated by these unique appearances, the focus should always be on the well-being of the animals. Speaking of well-being, the Wikipedia excerpt paints a pretty grim picture of how much the tiger's habitat has shrank over time.
It is concerning. Tigers once roamed from Turkey all the way to Southeast Asia and Russia, but today they occupy less than 7% of that historical range.
That's a dramatic decline.
Well,
What are the main drivers behind this habitat loss?
deforestation is a huge issue, often driven by the need for agricultural land and resources like timber. Then there's the development of what's called linear infrastructure.
Linear infrastructure, what does that mean exactly?
Think roads, railways, pipelines.
Ah,
Anything that cuts through a tiger's habitat, making it difficult for them to move freely and find food. It fragments their territories and can isolate populations.
so it's not just about the total amount of habitat lost, but also how fragmented and disconnected it becomes. And the Wikipedia article mentioned mining activities too, right?
Yes, mining can be extremely destructive to tiger habitats,
Right.
clearing vast areas of forest and often polluting water sources. It's a serious threat in many parts of Southeast Asia.
So we're seeing a combination of factors putting pressure on tiger populations, from deforestation and infrastructure development to mining activities. It's a lot for them to contend with.
It is, and it raises questions about how tigers are managing to survive in these increasingly challenging environments.
Well, that brings us to their daily lives, doesn't it? How do they carve out a living in these diverse and often shrinking landscapes?
Tigers are solitary creatures, each with their own territory they fiercely defend. A male's territory often overlaps with several females, and they communicate through a fascinating array of vocalizations and scent markings.
It's like they're sending out invisible signals to each other. What kinds of sounds do they make?
Roars, moans, growls, you name it. They even make a sound similar to a purr called a prustin, which is thought to be a friendly greeting.
Wait, a purring tiger? I always picture them as these fierce, roaring beasts. It's interesting to think they have a softer side, too.
It is. And when it comes to hunting, they rely on stealth and surprise.
Right.
They're ambush predators, primarily targeting large ungulates like deer and wild boar.
So they're all about patience and power. The Wikipedia entry mentions that they can drag prey much larger than themselves, right?
Yes, they have incredible strength.
Wow.
A tiger can drag a buffalo carcass for quite a distance, even uphill. They're truly formidable predators.
It's amazing how they've adapted to be such successful hunters in such a variety of habitats.
Yeah.
But sadly, we can't ignore the immense challenges they face today. I'm thinking about the threats to their survival that we touched on earlier.
You're right. We need to address those threats head on if we want to see tigers thriving in the wild.
It's almost hard to believe that something as powerful as a tiger could be facing such serious threats.
It is a stark reality. Habitat loss is a major factor, but there's also the persistent issue of poaching.
The Wikipedia page was pretty clear about that poaching for their fur and for use in traditional medicine continues to be a huge problem.
Yes, and it's driven by a complex mix of factors, including poverty, lack of economic opportunities in tiger range countries, and demand for these products often fueled by cultural beliefs.
It seems like we need to be tackling this problem from multiple angles, reducing demand, providing alternative livelihoods, and strengthening law enforcement.
Absolutely. It's a multi-pronged challenge.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that the relationship between humans and tigers isn't always adversarial. In fact, tigers have held a place of reverence and fascination in many cultures for centuries.
That's right. I was struck by how the Wikipedia entry talked about tigers in mythology and folklore. They're often seen as symbols of power, strength, and even royalty in some cultures.
Yeah. Exactly. In China, the tiger is considered the king of the forest, while in Hindu mythology, the goddess Durga is depicted riding a tiger representing feminine power and protection. These beliefs reflect a deep respect for tigers and their place in the natural world.
And those cultural representations have certainly made their way into modern media as well. I mean, who could forget Shere Khan from The Jungle Book or the lovable Tigger from Winnie the Pooh?
You're right. Tigers have captured our imaginations for generations, both as fearsome creatures and as beloved characters, and that fascination can actually play a role in conservation efforts.
How so?
When people feel a connection to tigers, they're more likely to care about their fate.
Right.
That can translate into support for conservation organizations, donations, or even just spreading awareness about the threats tigers face.
So it's about tapping into that sense of wonder and admiration and turning it into action.
Precisely. But of course, there's another side to the human-tiger relationship that we need to acknowledge, the potential for conflict and danger.
Yes. The Wikipedia page mentioned that tiger attacks can and do happen. It's a reminder that these are wild animals with their own instincts and behaviors.
Exactly. While most tiger attacks are defensive, such as a mother protecting her cubs, there have been cases of tigers becoming what's known as man-eaters.
That sounds terrifying. What causes a tiger to turn on humans?
It's often a combination of factors. Older tigers, especially those that are injured or struggling to hunt their usual prey, might be more likely to view humans as a potential food source.
So it's a matter of desperation and survival in some cases. But the Wikipedia entry also talked about how human encroachment into tiger habitats can increase the risk of conflict, right?
Absolutely. As humans continue to expand into tiger territories, whether through deforestation, agriculture, or infrastructure development, the chances of encountering tigers increase, and that can lead to dangerous situations for both parties.
That's why it's so important to create buffer zones and wildlife corridors.
Yeah.
Right. Giving tigers the space they need to roam and hunt without coming into contact with humans.
Exactly. But it's not just about protecting tigers in the wild. We also need to talk about the significant population of tigers living in captivity.
Yes, the Wikipedia page pointed out that there are actually more tigers living in captivity than in the wild. That raises some pretty complex ethical questions about their well-being and how they should be managed.
It's a debate that has been ongoing for many years. On one hand, captive breeding programs can play a role in conservation by preserving genetic diversity and potentially providing a source of animals for future reintroduction efforts.
It's like an insurance policy for the species. But on the other hand, we need to make sure that these tigers are being kept in humane conditions.
Absolutely. Their enclosures should be spacious and stimulating, mimicking their natural environments as much as possible.
Right.
Enrichment activities are crucial to keep them mentally and physically active.
I've read about some zoos creating elaborate habitats with climbing structures, pools, and even scent trails to engage their senses. It sounds like they're really trying to replicate the wild experience for these captive tigers.
Yes, and many zoos are moving away from the old-fashioned sterile cages and toward more naturalistic enclosures that promote the animal's well-being. But zoos aren't the only places where tigers are kept in captivity.
Right. The Wikipedia entry mentioned the history of tigers being used in circuses and other entertainment shows. It's a practice that, thankfully, is becoming less common due to ethical concerns.
Yes, the use of wild animals in circuses has been widely criticized for the potential for animal cruelty and the stress it inflicts on these creatures.
Right.
Many countries have now banned or severely restricted the use of tigers and other wild animals in circuses.
It's a sign of progress in our understanding of animal welfare. But sadly, there's another problem we need to address: the exotic pet trade.
Yes, unfortunately, tigers are still bought and sold as status symbols by private collectors. This is incredibly harmful because most people simply don't have the knowledge, resources, or space to provide adequate care for a tiger.
It's not fair to the animal, and it can be dangerous for the owner and the surrounding community. Imagine a tiger escaping from a backyard enclosure. It's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And sadly, many tigers in the pet trade end up neglected, abused, or even abandoned when their owners realize they can't handle them.
It's heartbreaking to think about these magnificent creatures being subjected to such conditions, but it sounds like there are efforts being made to crack down on this illegal trade.
Yes, many countries are enacting stricter laws and regulations to protect tigers from being exploited in the pet trade. And there's also a growing awareness among the public about the ethical implications of keeping tigers as pets.
Well, it seems we've covered a lot of ground here, from the historical reverence for tigers to the modern challenges they face, including poaching, habitat loss, and the complexities of captivity.
It's a complex and multifaceted issue, and it's clear that there's no easy solution.
But through all of this, I'm still struck by the resilience of these animals. They've managed to survive despite tremendous odds.
That's the beauty of tigers. They're incredibly adaptable and resourceful. And with the right conservation efforts, we can help them not just survive, but thrive.
So we've talked about the threats, but now let's delve into the solutions. What's being done to protect tigers and ensure their survival?
Well, the good news is that there are some truly dedicated people and organizations working tirelessly on tiger conservation, and we're seeing progress on several fronts.
That's heartening to hear. What are some of the most promising strategies being implemented?
One of the cornerstones of tiger conservation is the establishment of protected areas like tiger reserves.
Okay.
These are areas set aside specifically for tiger conservation, where activities like hunting, logging, and encroachment are strictly prohibited.
It's like creating safe havens where tigers can thrive without human interference.
Exactly. And the Wikipedia page highlights the success of these reserves. In India, for example, there are over 50 tiger reserves, and in many cases, tiger populations within these protected areas are stabilizing or even increasing.
That's fantastic. It shows that with dedicated effort and resources, we can make a real difference. But what about the areas outside these reserves? How do we protect tigers that share landscapes with humans?
That's a critical question, and it's where the concept of wildlife corridors comes into play.
Corridors. I've heard that term before, but I'm not entirely sure what it means.
Imagine patches of forest-like islands separated by human-dominated landscapes. Wildlife corridors act as bridges between these islands, allowing tigers to move freely, find mates, and access larger territories.
So they're essential for maintaining genetic diversity and preventing populations from becoming isolated. Are there actual examples of these corridors being implemented successfully?
Yes, absolutely. The Wikipedia entry mentions some successful corridor initiatives in Nepal and India, connecting crucial tiger habitats.
Okay.
These corridors aren't just beneficial for tigers either. They help protect a whole range of species and maintain healthy ecosystems.
It's a win-win for both wildlife and the environment as a whole. But I imagine creating these corridors isn't always easy, especially in areas where human populations are growing and land is in high demand.
You're right. It requires careful planning, community engagement, and often compromises on both sides. It's about finding ways for humans and tigers to coexist peacefully.
It's a balancing act for sure, but it sounds like these corridors are a vital part of the long-term solution for tiger conservation. What other strategies are being used on the ground to protect tigers?
Anti-poaching efforts are absolutely essential. We need to stop the illegal killing of tigers and the trafficking of their parts.
Right.
This involves strengthening law enforcement, increasing patrol efforts in known poaching hotspots, and using technology like camera traps and DNA analysis to track poachers and gather evidence.
It sounds like a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with conservationists working tirelessly to stay one step ahead of the poachers. And it's not just about catching the poachers, it's also about addressing the demand for tiger parts, right?
Absolutely. We need to reduce demand by tackling the root causes, such as poverty and the belief in the medicinal properties of tiger parts.
Yeah.
This involves education, raising awareness about the ecological importance of tigers, and providing alternative livelihoods for people who might otherwise be involved in poaching.
So it's a multifaceted approach that requires cooperation on a global scale. Are there any innovative technologies being used to aid in tiger conservation?
Yes. Technology is playing an increasingly important role.
Okay.
For example, satellite tracking collars allow researchers to monitor tiger movements, understand their habitat use, and identify areas where they might be at risk. Drones are being used to patrol vast areas of forest for signs of poaching activity. And DNA analysis helps trace seized tiger parts back to their origin, providing valuable data for law enforcement.
It's amazing how technology is being harnessed to give tigers a fighting chance. But the Wikipedia entry also mentioned reintroduction programs. Can you explain what those involve?
Reintroduction programs aim to reestablish tiger populations in areas where they've become locally extinct. This involves carefully selecting suitable habitats, raising tigers in captivity, or sourcing them from other wild populations and then releasing them into the wild.
It's like giving tigers a second chance in their former homes.
Yeah.
But I imagine it's a complex process with a lot of challenges.
It is. It requires extensive planning, habitat assessment, and post-release monitoring to ensure the tigers can survive and thrive in their new environment. They often need to be trained to hunt and avoid human contact.
It's like a delicate dance between human intervention and giving tigers the space and skills they need to be wild again. Are there any successful examples of tiger reintroduction programs?
Yes. The Wikipedia page mentioned ongoing efforts to reintroduce tigers in places like India, Sumatra, and even Russia, with varying levels of success.
Wow.
There's even a project underway to reintroduce the South China tiger, which is extinct in the wild, back into a protected area in China.
Wow, that's an ambitious undertaking. It gives me hope to know that people are dedicated to bringing these magnificent creatures back from the brink. But with all these conservation efforts in place, are we seeing any real progress? Is the future looking brighter for tigers?
The situation is still precarious, but there are definitely signs of hope.
Yeah.
In some areas where conservation efforts are strong and well-funded, tiger populations are showing signs of recovery. The global wild tiger population has even increased slightly in recent years, which is a testament to the dedication of conservationists around the world.
So the fight is far from over, but we're starting to see some positive results.
Exactly. It's a long and challenging journey, but with continued efforts, there's reason to believe that tigers can have a future.
It's a powerful reminder that we can make a difference. Every action counts, whether it's supporting conservation organizations, raising awareness, or simply making responsible choices in our daily lives that minimize our impact on tiger habitats.
Well said. I think the key takeaway from all of this is that the future of tigers is in our hands. We have a responsibility to protect these magnificent creatures for generations to come.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the biology and behavior of tigers to the threats they face and the incredible efforts being made to protect them.
And I hope it's left you with a sense of awe and wonder at the resilience and adaptability of these amazing animals.
It certainly has for me. Tigers are a symbol of wildness, beauty, and the interconnectedness of all living things.
And their survival depends on our willingness to understand them, respect them, and fight for their future.
So as you go about your day, dear listener, we encourage you to remember what you've learned about tigers. Share your knowledge with others, support conservation efforts, and make choices that help protect these incredible creatures. The fate of tigers is intertwined with our own, and together we can ensure that they continue to roam free for generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.